The train whistle pierced the silence of the vast Wyoming wilderness as blood trickled down Beatrice Norwood's temple. Her body sprawled in the dirt mere feet from the railroad tracks. The setting sun cast long shadows across her still form, her once pristine blue traveling dress now torn and caked with dust. She had been robbed, beaten, and left for dead by men she'd foolishly trusted, men who'd promised safe passage west but delivered only betrayal. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing Beatrice registered was the rhythmic rumble of hoofbeats approaching through the golden haze of dusk. Lucas Jameson pulled back on his stallion's reins, dust swirling around them as they came to an abrupt halt. His weathered face creased with concern beneath his wide-brimmed hat as he spotted what appeared to be a body beside the tracks. The year was 1875, and the Wyoming Territory was still wild, untamed, and dangerous, especially for those who traveled alone. Lucas had seen his share of death in his 30 years, but something about this scene made his heart hammer against his ribs. "Whoa, thunder," he murmured, dismounting in one fluid motion. His spurs jingled as his boots hit the ground. Drawing his revolver from its holster, a precaution learned through years on the frontier, he approached cautiously. When he realized it was a woman lying there, barely breathing but alive, he holstered his weapon and knelt beside her. Her face, though bruised and bloodied, held a delicate beauty that made his breath catch. "Miss?" Lucas gently turned her head, checking the wound at her temple. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but remained closed. Lucas glanced around, searching for signs of whoever had done this, but saw only the endless prairie stretching toward the distant mountains. Night was falling fast, and with it would come the unforgiving cold of the high country. "I'll get you home," he promised softly, carefully lifting her into his arms. "Just hold on." Beatrice stirred slightly at the movement, a soft moan escaping her lips before she fell silent again. Lucas carried her to his horse, then mounted with practiced ease while cradling her against his chest. Thunder snorted, uneasy with the additional burden, but Lucas soothed him with a few quiet words. "Come on, boy. We need to get her somewhere safe before nightfall." With one arm securing the unconscious woman against him, Lucas guided his horse away from the tracks, heading toward the small cabin he called home, some 5 miles distant. The setting sun bathed the landscape in fiery hues, and Lucas couldn't help but notice how the same golden light caught in the woman's auburn hair. "Who did this to you?" he whispered, though he expected no answer. In this territory, there was no shortage of outlaws and desperate men who would think nothing of robbing a lone woman and leaving her to die. The thought kindled a slow, burning anger in his gut. By the time Lucas's cabin came into view, darkness had nearly fallen. The modest structure stood alone on a small rise, backed by a stand of pines. A thin wisp of smoke still rose from the chimney, the remnants of the morning fire he'd banked, before riding out to check his trap lines. Thunder knew they were home and picked up his pace without prompting. Lucas dismounted carefully, still holding the woman, and pushed open the cabin door with his shoulder. Inside, he gently laid her on his narrow bed, then quickly stoked the fire and lit a lamp. In the warm lamplight, he could better assess her injuries. The gash on her temple was the worst of it, still seeping blood, though thankfully it didn't look deep enough to be life-threatening. Her face was bruised with a darkening mark along her jawline. Her hands were scraped raw, suggesting she'd fought back against whoever had attacked her. Lucas fetched a basin of water and clean cloths. As he began to carefully wash away the blood and dirt from her face, her eyelids fluttered open. For an instant, confusion clouded her gaze, then panic seized her. She gasped, trying to scramble away from him. "Easy now," Lucas said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." "Who?" Her voice cracked and she winced, one hand going to her throat. "Lucas Jameson," he replied, reaching slowly for a cup of water on the nearby table. "I found you by the railroad tracks. Here, drink this." She eyed him warily but took the cup with trembling hands. After a few cautious sips, she asked, "Where am I?" "My cabin, about 5 miles from where I found you." "What's your name, miss?" "Beatrice," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Beatrice Norwood." "Well, Miss Norwood, you've had a rough time of it. Can you tell me what happened?" Beatrice closed her eyes briefly, pain crossing her features that seemed to have nothing to do with her physical injuries. "I was traveling to Laramie. There were 3 men on the train. They seemed kind at first, offered to escort me when we had to disembark due to a damaged section of track ahead." Her voice grew bitter. "I was fool enough to believe them." Lucas's jaw tightened. "They robbed you." "Everything," she confirmed, her hand going to her neck where a necklace would have been. "My money, my trunk, even my mother's locket, when I tried to stop them." She trailed off, her hand touching her bruised jaw. "You're lucky to be alive," Lucas said quietly. "Am I?" Beatrice asked, her voice barely audible. Lucas looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said firmly. "You are, and I promise you, Miss Norwood, I'll get you where you need to go once you're well enough to travel." Beatrice studied him, seeming to gauge his sincerity. "Why would you help me?" "You don't know me." A faint smile touched Lucas's lips. "Out here we help those in need, it's how we survive." He paused. "Now I need to finish tending that wound on your head, may I?" After a brief hesitation, she nodded, wincing as she shifted on the bed. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson." "Lucas," he corrected, wringing out a cloth in the basin. "Just Lucas." As he gently cleaned her wound, Lucas couldn't help but wonder about the woman whose life had literally fallen into his hands. She spoke like someone educated, her diction precise despite her current state. Her traveling dress, though now ruined, had once been fine. What was she doing traveling alone to Laramie? Who was waiting for her there? "This might sting," he warned as he applied a bit of whiskey to disinfect the cut. Beatrice hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, noticing the methodical way he worked. Lucas shook his head. "No, but I was a field medic during the war." He didn't specify which side. Some wounds were still too fresh, even a decade later. "I've patched up worse than this." "The war," Beatrice echoed softly. "My brother died at Antietam." Lucas's hand stilled for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "It was a long time ago," she replied, though the sadness in her voice suggested otherwise. Once he'd finished cleaning the wound, Lucas applied a small bandage. "You should rest now," he said, straightening. "I'll make up a pallet for myself by the fire." "I can't take your bed," Beatrice protested. "You can and you will," Lucas insisted gently. "You need proper rest to recover." Too exhausted to argue further, Beatrice sank back against the pillow. Lucas pulled a quilt over her and moved to prepare his makeshift bed on the floor. "Lucas," she called softly as he was about to extinguish the lamp. "Yes, thank you," Beatrice said, her eyes already closing. "For finding me, for saying you'd get me home." Something in her choice of words caught him. "And where is home, Miss Norwood?" But Beatrice had already drifted into sleep, her breathing becoming deep and even. Lucas watched her for a moment, then blew out the lamp, leaving only the flickering firelight to illuminate the small cabin. As he settled on his pallet, he found himself wondering what twist of fate had brought this woman into his life. Lucas had lived alone for 3 years, since returning west after the war. He'd kept to himself, trapping in winter, working cattle in summer, and speaking to others only when necessary. He'd grown accustomed to the solitude, or so he'd told himself. Yet as he listened to Beatrice's soft breathing across the room, something long dormant stirred within him. A sense of purpose, perhaps, or something more complicated that he wasn't ready to name. Morning brought golden light streaming through the cabin's single window. Lucas had risen before dawn, as was his habit, moving quietly to avoid waking his unexpected guest. He'd stoked the fire, put coffee on to boil, and slipped outside to tend to thunder and check his nearby traps. When he returned, arms laden with firewood, Beatrice was awake, sitting up in bed with the quilt drawn around her shoulders. In the clear morning light, despite the bruising, he could see she was truly beautiful: high cheekbones, expressive brown eyes, and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of inner strength. "Good morning," he said, setting down the wood. "How are you feeling?" Beatrice touched the bandage at her temple gingerly. "Like I've been thrown from a horse," she admitted. "But better than yesterday. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Lucas." He nodded, pouring her a cup of coffee and bringing it to her. "Hungry? I can make some breakfast." "Please," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. "I don't think I've eaten since before." Lucas set about preparing a simple meal of bacon and biscuits left from the previous day. As he worked, he could feel Beatrice watching him. "You live here alone?" she asked finally. "Yes," Lucas replied, turning the bacon in the pan. "For about 3 years now, no family." He shook his head. "Parents passed before the war, no siblings, no wife." He glanced at her. "What about you? You mentioned you were headed to Laramie." Beatrice hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was the best approach with the man who had saved her life. "I was going to teach at the new school there. They advertised for a teacher in the Boston papers." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You're a long way from Boston." "Yes," she said, a shadow crossing her face. "I needed a fresh start." Lucas nodded, not pressing for details she clearly wasn't ready to share. "Well, Laramie's about 3 days' ride from here once you're well enough to travel." 3 days? Beatrice looked dismayed. "But my position, I was supposed to arrive yesterday. They'll think I've changed my mind or that something happened to you on the journey," Lucas finished for her. "Which it did. I'm sure they'll understand once you explain." Beatrice didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "How soon can we leave?" "Not today," Lucas said firmly, bringing her a plate with bacon and a biscuit. "That head wound needs at least another day's rest, and you need proper clothes for traveling." He eyed her torn dress. "I might have something that could work, though it'll be too big." "I can't impose on you any further," Beatrice protested. "You've already done so much." "It's no imposition," Lucas assured her. "I promised I'd get you home, and I mean to keep that promise." Beatrice looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You're an unusual man, Lucas Jameson." He gave a short laugh. "Out here, we're all a bit unusual, I suppose." They ate in companionable silence, the crackling of the fire and the occasional call of birds outside the only sounds. Afterward, Lucas checked her wound, pleased to see it was already looking better. "I need to go into town for supplies," he told her. "Riversbend is about an hour's ride. Will you be all right here alone?" Beatrice nodded. "I'll be fine. I'd rather not have anyone else see me in this state anyway." "I'll bring back something for you to wear," Lucas promised. "Rest while I'm gone." Before leaving, Lucas made sure Beatrice had water, food within reach, and after a moment's hesitation, his spare revolver. "You know how to use this?" he asked, showing her how to check if it was loaded. "My father taught me," she replied, handling the weapon with unexpected confidence, "though I haven't fired one in years." "Let's hope you won't need to," Lucas said, "but just in case." As he rode to Riversbend, Lucas found his thoughts repeatedly returning to his mysterious guest. There was clearly more to her story than she was telling. A schoolteacher from Boston didn't simply decide to take a position in Wyoming territory without good reason. But whatever her secrets, they were hers to keep or share as she chose. River's Bend was little more than a collection of buildings serving the surrounding ranches and homesteads. A general store, a saloon that doubled as a hotel, a small church, and a handful of other structures made up the entirety of the town. Lucas tied Thunder outside the general store and went in, nodding to old Mrs. Larson behind the counter. "Lucas Jameson," she greeted him warmly. "Twice in 1 month. To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Need a few things, Mrs. Larson," he replied, scanning the shelves. "Including some ladies' clothing, if you have any." The older woman's eyebrows shot up. "Ladies' clothing? Now that's a request I never expected from you." Lucas sighed, knowing how quickly news traveled in small communities. "Found a woman by the tracks yesterday. She'd been robbed and beaten. I'm helping her get to Laramie once she's well enough to travel." Mrs. Larson's expression softened. "Poor dear. Let me see what I have." While she disappeared into the back room, Lucas gathered the other supplies he needed. When Mrs. Larson returned, she carried a modest bundle of clothing. "These belong to my niece who stayed with us last summer," she explained. "Simple but clean and sturdy, should do for traveling." Lucas thanked her and paid for his purchases. As he was about to leave, Mrs. Larson called after him, "Lucas, be careful. There's been talk of the Blackwell gang operating in the area. 3 men, led by that devil Frank Blackwell. They've been robbing travelers and worse." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I'll keep that in mind," he said grimly, suspecting these might be the men who had attacked Beatrice. The ride back to his cabin seemed longer than usual, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of Beatrice alone and vulnerable. When the cabin finally came into view, relief washed over him. Everything looked peaceful, undisturbed. Inside, he found Beatrice sitting in his single chair by the fire, his spare shirt draped over her torn dress for warmth. She looked up as he entered, a small smile brightening her face. "You're back," she said, and the genuine pleasure in her voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. "Got everything we need," Lucas replied, setting down his purchases, "including some clothes for you courtesy of Mrs. Larson's niece." Beatrice accepted the bundle gratefully. "I'll find a way to repay your kindness, Lucas, I promise." He waved away her words. "No need for that. But there is something you should know." He told her about the Blackwell gang, watching her face carefully as he described them. "That sounds like them," she confirmed, her expression darkening. "The leader called himself Frank. He seemed so gentlemanly at first." "Men like that are experts at appearing to be what they are not," Lucas said. "But at least now we know who to watch for." Beatrice stood, clutching the bundle of clothes. "If they're still in the area, they could come here. I'm putting you in danger by staying." "You're not going anywhere until you're healed," Lucas said firmly. "And don't worry about me. I can handle myself." Despite his reassurances, he did take extra precautions that night, checking his rifle and keeping it close at hand. After Beatrice had changed into the simple calico dress Mrs. Larson had provided and they'd eaten a supper of beans and cornbread, they sat by the fire, the evening stretching comfortably before them. "Tell me about yourself, Lucas," Beatrice said, breaking the companionable silence. "How did you end up living alone in the wilderness?" Lucas stared into the flames, considering his answer. "I fought in the war, Union side. When it ended, I couldn't go back to my old life in Pennsylvania. Too much had changed, including me." He paused. "I drifted west, worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army. Eventually saved enough to buy this place. And you've been here ever since, pretty much," he acknowledged. "It suits me." "Don't you get lonely?" Beatrice asked softly. Lucas glanced at her, then back at the fire. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But loneliness can find you in a crowded city just as easily as out here." Beatrice nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's true enough." "Your turn," Lucas said. What's the real reason a Boston schoolteacher decides to take a position in Laramie? Beatrice tensed, then seemed to deflate slightly. Is it that obvious I'm running from something? People usually are when they come west, Lucas replied gently. She was silent for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she sighed. I was engaged to be married, she said, her voice low. To a man my parents approved of, a banker, respectable, wealthy, but I discovered he was not the man he pretended to be. Lucas waited, giving her space to continue. I found him with another woman, Beatrice said, her voice hardening. When I broke off our engagement, he became vengeful. He used his influence to ensure no school in Boston would hire me, said I was morally unfit to teach children. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. My reputation was ruined. So when I saw the advertisement for Laramie, I took it as a sign, a chance to start fresh where no one knew me or him. I'm sorry, Lucas said quietly. Men like that, they're not worth the pain they cause. No, Beatrice agreed, meeting his gaze. They're not. A small smile touched her lips. Thank you for listening, Lucas. I haven't told anyone that story. Your secret's safe with me, he assured her. Later, as they prepared for bed, Beatrice once again taking Lucas's bed despite her protests, and Lucas settling on his pallet, a comfortable understanding had grown between them. Two wounded souls, finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. The next morning brought a noticeable improvement in Beatrice's condition. The swelling around her wound had gone down, and though the bruises on her face had darkened to a deep purple, she moved with more confidence, less pain. I think I could travel tomorrow, she announced over breakfast. Lucas studied her critically. If you're sure you're up to it. I am, she said firmly. I need to get to Laramie, explain what happened. Hopefully the position is still available. And if it's not? Lucas asked, surprising himself with the question. Beatrice hesitated. I don't know. I suppose I'd have to find something else. The thought of her continuing on alone, potentially crossing paths with the men who had attacked her, settled uneasily in Lucas's stomach. I'll take you all the way to Laramie, he decided. Make sure you get there safely. Lucas, no, that's at least a week's journey there and back. I can't ask that of you. You didn't ask, he pointed out. I offered. Besides, I need supplies that I can only get in a larger town. It wasn't entirely true, but it gave him a practical reason beyond his growing concern for her welfare, a concern that, he was beginning to realize, went beyond simple neighborly duty. Beatrice looked as though she might argue further, then nodded. Thank you. I'd feel safer with you accompanying me. The day passed in preparations for their journey. Lucas checked his tack, cleaned his weapons, and packed provisions. Beatrice, determined to be useful, insisted on helping despite his protests. She mended her torn traveling dress as best she could, planning to wear it over the calico for additional warmth during the journey. As evening approached, a light snow began to fall, the first of the season. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching the flakes drift down, a frown creasing his brow. This complicates things, he said as Beatrice joined him. If it keeps up, the pass will be difficult tomorrow. We could wait, Beatrice suggested, though he could hear the reluctance in her voice. Lucas shook his head. No, better to go before it gets worse. Early winter snows can sometimes melt off quickly, but if this is the start of the season in earnest, we don't want to be trapped here. They stood together in the doorway, watching the snow fall in the gathering dusk. Without thinking, Lucas placed his arm around Beatrice's shoulders and she leaned into him slightly, accepting the comfort he offered. It's beautiful, she murmured. So peaceful. That it is, Lucas agreed, though he was looking at her profile rather than the snowy landscape. Beatrice turned to face him, perhaps sensing his gaze, and for a moment they were standing very close, their breath mingling in the cold air. Something passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. Then Beatrice stepped back, breaking the moment. "We should finish preparing for tomorrow," she said softly. Lucas nodded, trying to ignore the way his heart had quickened. "You're right." That night, as they settled into their now familiar sleeping arrangements, Lucas found sleep elusive. His thoughts kept returning to the moment in the doorway, to the look in Beatrice's eyes that had suggested she might be feeling the same unexpected connection he was. It was foolish, he told himself. In a few days, he would deliver her to Laramie and return to his solitary existence. Whatever was growing between them had no future. Yet as he finally drifted off to sleep, the sound of her soft breathing across the room provided a comfort he hadn't known he was missing. They set out at first light, the world transformed by a thin blanket of snow that sparkled in the early morning sun. The temperature had dropped overnight, and their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Beatrice, bundled in her mended dress over the calico, with Lucas's spare coat draped over her shoulders, sat behind him on Thunder. The powerful horse was accustomed to carrying double and moved steadily beneath them. "We'll make better time once we reach Dutchman's Pass," Lucas explained as they rode. "There's a trading post on the other side where we can get you a horse of your own for the rest of the journey." Beatrice nodded, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The closeness was both comforting and distracting, her warmth against his back a constant reminder of her presence. They rode in companionable silence for the most part, stopping occasionally to rest Thunder and stretch their legs. By midday, they had reached the foothills that led to Dutchman's Pass, a narrow trail that wound between towering cliffs. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said as they paused to eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. "I never imagined Wyoming would be like this." "It gets under your skin," Lucas admitted. "The open spaces, the mountains, even the harshness of it makes you feel alive." Beatrice studied him. "You really love it here, don't you?" "I do," he said simply. "Found a kind of peace I couldn't find elsewhere." "I envy you that," she said softly. "Peace has been hard to come by for me these past months." Lucas met her gaze. "Maybe you'll find it in Laramie." Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, perhaps. But before she could respond, Thunder snorted and pawed the ground nervously, his ears pricking forward. Lucas was instantly alert, his hand moving to his revolver. Something spooked him. They listened, the silence of the wilderness suddenly oppressive. Then Lucas heard it, the faint sound of hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching from the direction they had come. "Could be anyone," Beatrice said, but her voice betrayed her fear. "Could be," Lucas agreed, though his instincts were screaming a warning. "But let's not take chances. Come on." They mounted quickly, Lucas urging Thunder toward the pass. If they could reach the narrow trail, they'd have a better defensive position if trouble came looking for them. They had just entered the mouth of the pass when Lucas heard the riders closing in. "Keep going," he told Beatrice, guiding Thunder to a rocky outcropping that provided some cover. Drawing his rifle, he helped Beatrice dismount and positioned her behind him. 3 riders appeared at the entrance to the pass, pulling their horses to a stop when they spotted Lucas and Beatrice. Even at a distance, Lucas could see the leader smile when he recognized Beatrice. "Well, well," the man called, his voice carrying in the clear mountain air. "Look who we found, boys, the school teacher who gave us the slip." "Frank Blackwell," Beatrice whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Stay behind me," Lucas murmured, raising his rifle. In a louder voice he called, "That's far enough, Blackwell," the outlaw laughed. "And who might you be, friend?" "Someone who doesn't take kindly to men who rob and beat women," Lucas replied coldly. "Turn around and ride away and we'll forget we saw you." "Now, why would we do that?" Blackwell asked, his hand moving toward his holster. when the lady still owes us something for our trouble. I have nothing left for you to steal, Beatrice called, her voice stronger than Lucas expected. Oh, I can think of a few things, Blackwell replied, his tone making his meaning clear. Rage surged through Lucas. Last chance, he warned. Ride away. Instead, Blackwell drew his pistol. Lucas fired in the same instant, his shot hitting the outlaw's shoulder. Blackwell cried out, nearly falling from his horse. His companions drew their weapons, and Lucas pushed Beatrice deeper into the cover of the rocks as bullets ricocheted off stone around them. Thunder bolted at the gunfire, disappearing up the pass. Lucas cursed under his breath, but kept his focus on the threat before them. He fired again, forcing the outlaws to seek cover of their own. We're pinned down, he told Beatrice, but they can't get to us without exposing themselves. What do we do? She asked, remarkably calm despite the danger. Wait them out, Lucas replied, checking his ammunition. They'll either get bold and try to rush us, or they'll give up and leave. And if they rush us, Lucas met her gaze steadily, then I'll stop them. The standoff continued as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The occasional shot rang out, keeping Lucas and Beatrice pinned behind their rocky shelter, but the outlaws seemed equally unwilling to expose themselves to Lucas's accurate fire. As shadows lengthened across the pass, Lucas could hear the men arguing among themselves. Finally, Blackwell's voice carried to them. "This ain't over, schoolteacher," he called. "We know you're headed to Laramie. We'll be waiting." The sound of retreating hoofbeats confirmed they were withdrawing, but Lucas waited several minutes before cautiously peering around their shelter. "They're gone," he confirmed, "but I don't trust Blackwell's word. They could be setting up an ambush further along the pass." "What do we do?" Beatrice asked again, her composure beginning to crack now that the immediate danger had passed. Lucas considered their options. "Thunder's gone, probably halfway to the trading post by now. We can either follow the pass on foot and hope to catch up to him, or we can backtrack and try to find another way around." "Could we make it to the trading post before nightfall?" Lucas shook his head. "Not on foot. It's at least another 4 hours' ride. And if we stay here, we'd be exposed, vulnerable," Lucas said grimly. "No, we need to move. There's a line shack about a mile up the pass. Old miner's cabin. We can shelter there for the night." With no better options, they gathered what supplies they could carry from Lucas's saddlebags, which thankfully he had removed when they stopped. The temperature was dropping rapidly as evening approached, and Beatrice shivered despite the layers she wore. "Stay close," Lucas instructed as they set off, his rifle ready. "And step where I step." The trek to the line shack was tense, every sound in the wilderness making them pause and listen for pursuit. By the time the small, dilapidated cabin came into view, the sun had set, and they were navigating by the faint light of a rising moon. The shack was little more than 4 walls and a roof, with a small stone fireplace and a single window covered with oilskin. It had clearly been abandoned for some time, but it would provide shelter from the cold night ahead. "It's not much," Lucas apologized, securing the door behind them, "but it'll keep us alive until morning." "It's perfect," Beatrice assured him, sinking onto a rough wooden bench, the only furniture besides a rickety table. Lucas quickly gathered the few pieces of firewood stacked beside the fireplace and set about starting a fire. Once the flames were crackling, casting a warm glow throughout the small space, he joined Beatrice on the bench. "You handled yourself well back there," he said quietly. "Many would have panicked." Beatrice gave a small, humorless laugh. "I think I'm still in shock. It hasn't quite sunk in that we were shot at by outlaws." "Welcome to the West," Lucas said dryly. Despite everything, Beatrice smiled. "Not exactly the welcome I was expecting. They sat in silence for a while, watching the flames and taking comfort in each other's presence. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the walls and bringing with it the promise of more snow. "You think they really went to Laramie?" Beatrice asked eventually. "To wait for us?" Lucas considered the question. "Possibly. Blackwell seems the type to hold a grudge. But he's also wounded now, which might slow them down." "I've brought nothing but trouble to you," Beatrice said, guilt evident in her voice. "You should have left me by those tracks." Lucas turned to her, taking her hand impulsively. "Don't say that, not ever." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. The tension that had been building since that moment in his cabin doorway crystallizing into something undeniable. Without conscious thought, Lucas leaned forward, and Beatrice met him halfway, their lips coming together in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened with unexpected hunger. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Lucas started to apologize, but Beatrice silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say you're sorry." "I'm not," he admitted. "But this is complicated." "Life is complicated," Beatrice replied. "But right now, in this moment, this feels like the simplest thing in the world." She kissed him again, and Lucas surrendered to the feeling, to the warmth of her in his arms, to the unexpected joy of finding connection in the wilderness. They spent the night huddled together before the fire, sharing warmth, sharing stories, sharing touches and kisses that spoke of a growing affection neither had anticipated. Morning brought the reality of their situation back into focus. They needed to keep moving, to find Thunder or another means of transportation, and to decide whether to continue to Laramie despite Blackwell's threats. "I still need to go," Beatrice said as they prepared to leave the shelter of the line shack. "If the teaching position is gone, so be it. But I can't let men like Blackwell dictate my life." Lucas nodded, admiring her courage. "Then we go to Laramie, but we'll be careful and we'll find another route." The snow had stopped overnight, leaving about 3 inches on the ground. It would make tracking easier both for them to follow Thunder's trail and, unfortunately, for Blackwell to follow theirs if he chose to. They set out, following the pass upward. Lucas estimated they were about 3 miles from the trading post. If Thunder had indeed headed that way, they might find him there. If not, they would need to purchase or barter for horses to continue their journey. The hike was challenging, the snow making the steep trail slippery and treacherous. Lucas kept a watchful eye on Beatrice, but she managed admirably, her determination evident in every step. By midday, they had crested the highest point of the pass and could see the trading post in the distance, a plume of smoke rising from its chimney. "Almost there," Lucas encouraged, taking Beatrice's hand to help her navigate a particularly steep descent. They had just rounded a bend in the trail when Lucas spotted Thunder, grazing peacefully near the trading post's corral. Relief washed over him. "There he is," he said, pointing. "Looks like he's made some friends." Beatrice laughed, the sound bright in the crisp mountain air. "Thank goodness. I wasn't sure how much farther I could walk." They quickened their pace, eager to reach the relative safety and warmth of the trading post. As they approached, an older man emerged from the main building, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." "Name's Lucas Jameson," Lucas replied, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "That's my horse in your corral. He bolted during some trouble yesterday." The man squinted at them, then lowered his shotgun. "Jameson, haven't seen you in these parts for a spell." "Been keeping to myself," Lucas acknowledged. "This is Miss Beatrice Norwood. We're traveling to Laramie." The trader's demeanor softened at the sight of Beatrice. "Madam," he greeted with a nod. "Name's Hank Wilson. Come on in and warm yourselves. Your horse showed up last night, spooked something fierce. Inside the trading post was a welcome refuge from the cold. A large fire burned in the hearth, and the single room served as store, tavern, and gathering place all in one. Currently, it was empty save for them and Wilson. Not much traffic this time of year, Wilson explained, pouring them each a cup of hot coffee. Most folks sensible enough to settle in before the snow flies. Lucas briefly explained their encounter with the Blackwell gang, careful not to reveal too much about Beatrice's circumstances. Wilson spat into the fire. Blackwell's been a plague on these parts for months. Sheriff in Laramie's got a poster out for him, but he's slippery as an eel. He said they'd be waiting for us in Laramie, Beatrice said, warming her hands on the coffee cup. Wilson stroked his beard thoughtfully. There's another way to Laramie, he said after a moment. Takes a bit longer, goes south through Miller's Valley, then east. Adds about a day to your journey, but Blackwell and his boys likely won't know to watch for you there. Lucas glanced at Beatrice, who nodded. That sounds like our best option, he agreed. You'll need another horse, Wilson pointed out. Can't ride double all the way to Laramie, not with the weather turning. We can pay, Beatrice said quickly, then caught herself. Or rather, I can promise payment once we reach Laramie. My belongings were stolen, but I have friends there who will vouch for me. Wilson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Got a gentle mare that would suit you, madam, and I reckon if Lucas Jameson vouches for you, that's good enough for me. The relief on Beatrice's face was palpable. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. They spent the remainder of the day at the trading post, restocking their supplies and preparing for the journey ahead. Wilson provided them with detailed directions for the alternate route to Laramie and threw in a pair of warm gloves for Beatrice at no extra charge. As evening approached, Wilson offered them use of a small room behind the trading post where travelers could sleep. It was sparse but clean, with 2 narrow cots and a small stove. It's not much, Wilson apologized, but it's warm and dry. It's perfect, Beatrice assured him, echoing her words from the lined shack. Once alone, the awkwardness that had been kept at bay by practical concerns resurfaced. The intimacy they had shared in the lined shack hung between them, unacknowledged yet impossible to ignore. Lucas, Beatrice began, then hesitated. About last night. We don't have to talk about it, Lucas said quickly. It was a moment. Tensions were high. Beatrice's expression fell slightly. Is that all it was to you, a moment? Lucas ran a hand through his hair, struggling to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. No, he admitted finally. It was more than that, but I don't want you to feel obligated or confused because I helped you. Obligated, Beatrice repeated, a spark of anger in her eyes. Is that what you think? That I kissed you out of some sense of debt? No, because I can assure you, Lucas Jameson, that when I kiss a man, it's because I want to, not because I feel I owe him something. Despite the tension, Lucas couldn't help but smile at her indignation. I'm beginning to understand that, he said softly. And for the record, I wanted to kiss you too. Have since the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin. The anger drained from Beatrice's face, replaced by something warmer. She stepped closer to him. And now. Lucas reached for her, drawing her gently into his arms. Now I'd very much like to kiss you again. Their lips met in a tender kiss that held none of the desperate urgency of the night before, but carried its own sweetness, a promise of something deeper growing between them. When they parted, Beatrice rested her head against his chest, and Lucas held her close, savoring the moment of peace amid their uncertain journey. What happens when we reach Laramie? She asked softly. It was the question Lucas had been avoiding, the reality they both needed to face. I don't know, he admitted. I promised to get you home, but I'm starting to wonder if home might be something different than either of us expected." Beatrice looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "I've been running away from one life, toward another I've only imagined. Now I find myself wishing for something else entirely." "And what's that?" Lucas asked, his heart hammering in his chest. "A life where I don't have to choose between my dreams and my heart," she replied simply. "Is that possible, do you think?" Lucas brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm beginning to believe anything is possible with you, Beatrice Norwood." They slept in their separate cots that night, but the distance between them felt more physical than emotional. Something had shifted, a future neither had anticipated now taking shape in both their minds. Dawn brought clear skies and slightly warmer temperatures, a good day for traveling. Wilson helped them prepare for the journey, saddling the gentle mare he had promised Beatrice and providing final instructions for their alternate route to Laramie. "Stay alert," he warned as they mounted up. "Blackwell's gang isn't the only danger out there." "We will," Lucas assured him, checking his rifle one last time. Beatrice, looking more confident on horseback than Lucas had expected, extended her hand to Wilson. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Wilson." The old trader bowed slightly over her hand. "Safe travels, Miss Norwood. And Jameson," he added, giving Lucas a knowing look, "don't be a stranger around these parts." They set off at a steady pace, Beatrice quickly adjusting to her mount, whom she had named Penny for her copper-colored coat. The new route took them south through rolling hills, away from the mountains and into more open country. "You ride well," Lucas commented as they settled into a comfortable rhythm side by side. "My grandfather raised horses in Virginia," Beatrice explained. "I spent summers there as a child." "It's been years, but some things you don't forget. You're full of surprises, Miss Norwood." She smiled at him, the bruises on her face now fading to yellows and greens, her strength returning with each passing day. "As are you, Mr. Jameson." They rode for several hours, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and stretch their legs. The landscape was stunning in its vastness, the snow-dusted plains stretching toward distant mountains. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, there was a sense of adventure, of possibility, that neither had felt in a long time. By late afternoon, they had reached the northern edge of Miller's Valley, a broad expanse of grassland cradled between low hills. In the distance, they could see a thin column of smoke rising from what appeared to be a small homestead. Wilson mentioned there were a few settlers in the valley, Lucas recalled. "Said they were good folks, would offer help if needed. Should we stop?" Beatrice asked, shading her eyes against the lowering sun. Lucas considered the darkening sky. "Might be wise. We've got maybe an hour of daylight left, and camping in the open with temperatures dropping isn't ideal." They altered their course slightly, heading toward the homestead. As they drew closer, they could make out a modest cabin with a barn and corral, a small garden plot, and a few head of cattle grazing nearby. A woman emerged from the cabin as they approached, a rifle in her hands. "That's far enough," she called, her stance wary but not hostile. Lucas and Beatrice halted their horses. "Evening, madam," Lucas called back. "We're travelers headed to Laramie. Hank Wilson at the trading post said there might be friendly faces in the valley." At the mention of Wilson, the woman lowered her rifle slightly. "You know Hank?" "Stayed with him last night," Lucas confirmed. "I'm Lucas Jameson. This is Miss Beatrice Norwood." The woman studied them for a moment longer, then nodded. "Sarah Miller. This is Miller's Valley, named after my late husband, not that it matters much to anyone but me." She gestured toward the cabin. "Come on in. Looks like you could use a hot meal and a roof." Gratefully, they dismounted and followed Sarah Miller to the cabin. Inside, it was surprisingly cozy with handmade furniture, colorful quilts, and the warmth of a well-tended fire. A pot of something savory bubbled on the stove, filling the air with a mouth-watering aroma. "Venison stew," Sarah explained, noting their appreciative glances. "My boy Daniel brought down a deer yesterday. Speaking of which," she moved to the door and called, "Daniel, we've got company." A moment later, a young man of perhaps 16 entered from what Lucas assumed was the barn. He had his mother's dark hair and sturdy build, with a serious expression that suggested he'd taken on adult responsibilities at a young age. "Daniel, this is Mr. Jameson and Miss Norwood," Sarah introduced them. "They're headed to Laramie." Daniel nodded politely but said nothing, his eyes taking in the strangers with cautious interest. "Your son?" Beatrice asked Sarah. "Yes, my youngest," Sarah confirmed. "My older boy, Thomas, is in Laramie, apprenticed to a blacksmith. It's just Daniel and me now since my husband passed 2 years back." "I'm sorry for your loss," Beatrice said softly. Sarah's expression flickered with old grief, quickly suppressed. "Life goes on," she said simply. "Now, let's get you both fed. Daniel, would you see to their horses?" Over dinner, Lucas briefly explained their situation, omitting the more personal aspects but making it clear they were avoiding the Blackwell gang. Sarah's face darkened at the mention of Blackwell. "Those men paid us a visit last spring," she said grimly. "Took our best horse and what little cash we had, if Thomas hadn't been home at the time." She trailed off, her meaning clear. "They're a plague," Lucas agreed. "I put a bullet in Blackwell's shoulder yesterday, but I doubt it'll slow him down for long." "Good," Daniel said, speaking for the first time. "Hope it festers." "Daniel," his mother admonished, though without much conviction. "So you're to be the new teacher in Laramie?" Sarah asked Beatrice, changing the subject. "If the position is still available," Beatrice replied. "I was due there several days ago." "They'll wait for a proper teacher," Sarah assured her. "The last one didn't last a month, couldn't handle the children. Half of them have never seen the inside of a schoolhouse before." As the evening progressed, the atmosphere grew increasingly comfortable. Sarah shared stories of establishing the homestead with her husband, of the hard winters and the joy of watching their little valley flourish despite the challenges. Daniel gradually warmed to their guests, particularly to Lucas, asking questions about trapping and hunting that revealed his own ambitions. "He wants to head to the mountains someday," Sarah explained with a mixture of pride and worry. "I keep telling him there's plenty of adventure right here in the valley." "Ma, there's nothing here but cows and dirt," Daniel protested, the familiar argument clearly a long-standing one between them. "And safety," Sarah countered. "And home." The exchange gave Lucas pause, making him consider what home truly meant. He had called his cabin home for 3 years, yet until Beatrice had entered his life, it had never truly felt like one. When it came time to sleep, Sarah insisted Beatrice take Thomas's old room while Lucas could sleep in the main room by the fire. The arrangement was practical and proper, but as Lucas settled on his bedroll, he found himself missing Beatrice's presence more than he would have thought possible just days earlier. Sleep came fitfully, his mind filled with thoughts of the woman sleeping just a few feet away, separated by a thin wall, and of the uncertain future that awaited them in Laramie. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and bacon, and the sounds of Sarah already at work in the kitchen. Lucas rose, folding his bedroll neatly, and stepped outside to splash cold water on his face from the pump. The valley stretched before him, beautiful in the early light with a dusting of frost that sparkled like diamonds. It was the kind of view that had drawn him west, that had kept him in the wilderness despite the loneliness. For the first time, He allowed himself to imagine sharing such views with someone else, with Beatrice, not just for a journey, but for a lifetime. When he returned inside, Beatrice was already up, helping Sarah with breakfast. She looked up as he entered, and the smile she gave him sent warmth coursing through him that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. "Good morning," she greeted him. "Sarah's been telling me about the school in Laramie. Apparently the building is quite new with actual glass windows." "Sounds fancy," Lucas replied with a smile of his own. "It is," Sarah confirmed, placing a platter of bacon on the table. "Thomas says the whole town is growing so fast you wouldn't recognize it from one month to the next. Railroads changed everything." After breakfast, despite Sarah's invitation to stay longer, Lucas and Beatrice prepared to continue their journey. They still had at least a day and a half of travel ahead of them if they wanted to reach Laramie by the following evening. "You're welcome back anytime," Sarah told them as they mounted their horses. "Both of you." "Thank you," Beatrice said warmly. "Your hospitality has meant more than you know." As they rode away, Daniel accompanied them to the edge of the Miller property, pointing out the best route through the valley. "Keep the North Star to your right tonight," he advised. "That'll keep you on track for Laramie." Lucas offered the young man his hand. "Take care of your mother," he said. "She's lucky to have you." Daniel straightened with pride at the words. "Yes, sir. Safe travels." They rode steadily through the day, the rhythm of hooves on packed earth creating a soothing backdrop to their occasional conversation. By unspoken agreement, they avoided discussion of what would happen once they reached Laramie, instead sharing stories of their pasts, discovering shared interests in books and music, and falling into a companionable silence when words weren't needed. As the sun began to set, they found a sheltered spot to make camp near a small stream. Lucas built a fire while Beatrice tended to the horses, working together with the ease of longtime partners. "We make a good team," Beatrice observed as they sat side by side, sharing a simple meal. "We do," Lucas agreed, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. "Better than I would have expected." Beatrice turned to face him, her expression serious. "Lucas, I know we've avoided talking about what happens next, but we can't put it off forever. Tomorrow we'll reach Laramie." Lucas nodded, steeling himself for the conversation he'd been dreading. "What do you want to happen next, Beatrice?" She looked into the fire, gathering her thoughts. "When I left Boston, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. A fresh start, independence, a chance to prove myself as a teacher." She paused. "Now I'm not so sure." "Because of what happened with Blackwell?" Lucas asked, though he suspected her uncertainty had more to do with the growing connection between them. "No," Beatrice said, confirming his thoughts. "Because of you. Because in the short time we've known each other, I've felt more alive, more myself than I have in years." She met his gaze directly. "I'm falling in love with you, Lucas Jameson, and that wasn't part of my plan." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable, and Lucas felt his heart swell with an emotion he had long ago given up on experiencing. "I wasn't looking for this either," he admitted. "After the war, I convinced myself I was better off alone, safer that way." He reached for her hand. "But from the moment I found you by those tracks, something changed. I said I'd get you home, but the truth is I think I was the one who found home with you." Beatrice's eyes glistened in the firelight. "So what do we do?" "I don't know," Lucas said truthfully. "I can't ask you to give up your position, your dream. And I can't ask you to leave your life, your land." They sat in silence for a moment, the crackle of the fire and the soft nickering of the horses the only sounds. "Maybe," Lucas said slowly, "we don't have to choose. Not yet." He squeezed her hand gently. "Let's see what Laramie holds for you. If the teaching position is still available, take it. I can stay in town for a while, find work. We can see where this leads us." Hope bloomed in Beatrice's expression. "You would do that for a chance at a future with you?" "Yes." The conviction in his voice surprised even him. Beatrice leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss full of promise and possibility. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I never expected to find you, Lucas Jameson. Nor I you, Beatrice Norwood." They spent the night beneath the stars, their bedrolls placed close together, hands linked as they drifted into sleep. Whatever uncertainty the future held, they would face it together. The final day of their journey dawned clear and cold. They broke camp early, both eager to reach Laramie and discover what awaited them there. As they rode, the landscape gradually changed, the wild emptiness giving way to occasional homesteads, fenced pastures, and finally, the outskirts of the growing town. Laramie in 1875 was a town in transition, its dusty streets lined with a mix of hastily constructed wooden buildings and more substantial structures of brick and stone. The railroad had brought prosperity and growth, evident in the busy streets and the air of bustling commerce. "It's bigger than I expected," Beatrice remarked as they rode down the main street, attracting curious glances from townspeople. "Wilson mentioned it's grown considerably in the past year," Lucas replied, his eyes scanning their surroundings warily. Blackwell had threatened to be waiting for them, and Lucas wasn't about to let his guard down until he was certain Beatrice was safe. They made their way to the town's small hotel, where Beatrice had arranged to stay until more permanent lodgings could be found. The proprietor, a round-faced woman named Mrs. Hendricks, greeted them with surprise. "Miss Norwood, we'd given up hope you'd arrive. The school board was quite concerned." "I apologize for my tardiness," Beatrice replied. "I encountered some difficulties on the journey." "Is the position still available?" "Oh yes," Mrs. Hendricks assured her. "The children have been without proper instruction for weeks now. The board will be delighted you've arrived safely." She glanced curiously at Lucas. "And this gentleman is?" "Lucas Jameson," he introduced himself. "I escorted Miss Norwood from Wyoming Territory after she was robbed on her journey." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Hendricks's expression. "How terrible, but how fortunate you found help, Miss Norwood." As Mrs. Hendricks showed Beatrice to her room, Lucas remained in the hotel lobby, suddenly uncertain of his place. Their journey was over. He had fulfilled his promise to get her home. Yet the thought of leaving her filled him with a hollow ache. When Beatrice returned downstairs, she seemed to sense his discomfort. "Mrs. Hendricks says there's a room available for you as well," she said. "And she's directed me to the chairman of the school board. I'm to meet with him this afternoon." Lucas nodded, relieved to have a reason to stay, at least for the moment. "I should also speak with the sheriff about Blackwell. If he's still in the area, the law should know." They agreed to meet for supper after completing their respective tasks. As Beatrice set off for her meeting with the school board chairman, Lucas made his way to the sheriff's office, his senses alert for any sign of Blackwell or his men. The sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Jenkins, listened intently to Lucas's account of their encounter with the Blackwell gang. "Been after those boys for months," he growled when Lucas finished. "Got a wanted poster right here." He indicated a notice on the wall featuring crude sketches of 3 men, including a bearded figure labeled as Frank Blackwell. "He said they'd be waiting in Laramie," Lucas warned. "I don't know if that was just talk, but Miss Norwood is still in danger." Sheriff Jenkins stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "I'll put my deputies on alert. You said you wounded him." "Left shoulder," Lucas confirmed. "Rifle shot, not clean." "Good," the sheriff said grimly. "Might slow him down, make him easier to spot if he's in town." "You staying at the hotel?" Lucas nodded. "For now." "I'll send word if we hear anything," Jenkins promised. And Mr. Jameson, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Not everyone would take the trouble. After leaving the sheriff's office, Lucas took some time to explore the town, familiarizing himself with its layout while keeping an eye out for any sign of Blackwell. He also inquired about potential work, learning that a new ranch on the outskirts of town was looking for experienced hands. By the time he returned to the hotel to meet Beatrice for supper, the sun was setting, painting the town in shades of gold and amber. He found her waiting in the small dining room, her face alight with excitement. "I got the position," she announced as he joined her. "Classes begin on Monday." "That's wonderful," Lucas said, genuinely pleased for her. "The chairman was understanding about your delay." "More than understanding," Beatrice replied. "Apparently they were so desperate for a qualified teacher that they would have waited another month if necessary." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "They've even arranged for housing a small cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's nothing grand, but it's mine." "You deserve it," Lucas told her warmly. "You'll be an excellent teacher." "And you?" Beatrice asked. "What did the sheriff say?" Lucas relayed his conversation with Jenkins, reassuring her that the law was now aware of the threat Blackwell posed. "I also heard about work at a ranch outside town," he added. "Thought I might inquire tomorrow." Beatrice's expression softened. "So you're staying?" "For a while at least," Lucas confirmed. "If that's what you want." "It is," she said simply. "More than anything." They shared a quiet meal, both aware of the curious glances from other diners, a newcomer and a rough-looking frontiersman making an unusual pair. But neither cared about the speculation their presence might cause. After dinner, they walked together through the town, Beatrice pointing out the schoolhouse where she would teach and the small cottage that would be her home. It was indeed modest but sturdy and clean, with a small garden plot and a view of the mountains in the distance. "It's perfect," Lucas said, echoing her words from days earlier. Beatrice smiled up at him. "It could be," she said softly, "with the right company." As they stood together in the gathering darkness, the future stretched before them, uncertain but full of promise. They had both come west seeking something, Beatrice a new beginning, Lucas a solitary peace. Instead, they had found each other. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Beatrice prepared for her first day of teaching, meeting with parents and organizing the schoolroom. Lucas secured work at the Circle M Ranch, impressing the foreman with his experience and skill with horses. In the evenings, they met for supper, sharing the events of their day and growing closer with each passing hour. There was no sign of Blackwell or his gang, leading Sheriff Jenkins to speculate they had moved on to easier targets. "Wounded men tend to avoid towns with a strong law presence," he told Lucas. "My guess is they've headed to the Dakota Territory." Though relieved, Lucas remained vigilant, especially when Beatrice was alone. The memory of finding her beaten and left for dead was not one he would soon forget. On Sunday evening, the night before Beatrice was to begin teaching, they sat together on the small porch of her cottage, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Lucas asked, noting the way she fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "A little," Beatrice admitted. "I've taught before, but never children from such diverse backgrounds. Some have never been to school at all." "You'll do fine," Lucas assured her. "Those children are lucky to have you." Beatrice smiled gratefully. "How about you? Are you settling in at the ranch?" Lucas nodded. "The work is good. Foreman says if I prove myself there might be a permanent position come spring." "Spring," Beatrice echoed. "That's months away." "Yes," Lucas agreed, understanding the question she hadn't quite asked. "Plenty of time to decide what comes next for both of us." They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened into night. Finally, Lucas stood, knowing propriety demanded he leave before it grew too late. "I should go. You need rest before your big day tomorrow." Beatrice rose with him, taking his hands in hers. "Lucas," she said softly, "these past days have been the happiest of my life. Despite everything, the attack, Blackwell, all of it, I wouldn't change a moment, because it all led me to you." Lucas cupped her face gently. "When I found you by those tracks and said I'd get you home, I had no idea that home would come to mean something entirely different." He kissed her tenderly. "Get some rest, Miss Norwood. Your students await." The following weeks settled into a pleasant rhythm. Beatrice thrived as Laramie's schoolteacher, her natural warmth and intelligence winning over even the most reluctant students. Lucas proved his worth at the Circle M, his knowledge of the land and animals earning respect from the other hands. They spent every evening together, sometimes at Beatrice's cottage where she would cook a simple meal, other times at the hotel dining room or the small cafe that had recently opened on Main Street. On Sundays, they rode into the surrounding countryside, exploring their new home together. As autumn deepened toward winter, their feelings for each other grew stronger, more certain. What had begun as an unexpected connection forged in danger had blossomed into a deep, abiding love. It was on one such Sunday ride, nearly 2 months after their arrival in Laramie, that Lucas finally gave voice to the thoughts that had been occupying his mind. They had stopped to rest the horses near a small stream, the November air crisp, but not yet bitter with winter's chill. The landscape around them was painted in muted golds and browns, beautiful in its quiet way. "I've been thinking," Lucas began, helping Beatrice down from her horse, "about the future." "Oh," Beatrice said, trying to sound casual though her heart had begun to race. "Yes." Lucas took her hands in his. "When I found you by those tracks, I made a promise to get you home. I didn't know then what home really meant." Beatrice squeezed his hands encouragingly. "And what does it mean, Lucas?" "It means you," he said simply. "Wherever you are, that's home to me now. And I was hoping—" He paused, suddenly nervous despite the certainty in his heart. "I was hoping you might feel the same way." "I do," Beatrice whispered, her eyes shining. "From the moment you found me, something inside me recognized you not just as my rescuer, but as my future." Lucas reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, simple but elegant, with a single pearl set in gold. "Then, Beatrice Norwood, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of making a home with me, wherever that might be?" "Yes," Beatrice said without hesitation, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, Lucas Jameson, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Lucas felt a sense of rightness, of completion. The journey that had begun with finding a wounded woman beside the railroad tracks had led him to the greatest treasure of his life: love, belonging, and the promise of a future together. Their wedding was a simple affair, held in Laramie's small church, 2 weeks before Christmas. The town had embraced them both, by then Beatrice as their dedicated teacher, Lucas as a respected ranch hand known for his fairness and skill. Mrs. Hendricks from the hotel baked the wedding cake, and Sarah and Daniel Miller made the journey from their valley to attend, bringing with them a handmade quilt as a wedding gift. After the ceremony, as friends and well-wishers gathered at the schoolhouse for a modest reception, Lucas pulled his bride aside for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Jameson?" he asked, still marveling at being able to call her his wife. "More than I ever thought possible," Beatrice replied, her eyes radiant with joy. "And you, Mr. Jameson?" "I never expected this life," Lucas admitted. "Never thought I deserved it, but holding you now, knowing you're my wife, I'm the happiest man in the territory." As winter settled over Laramie, the newlyweds made their home in Beatrice's cottage, which Lucas expanded with an additional room before the worst of the weather set in. Beatrice continued teaching, beloved by her students and respected by their parents. Lucas's position at the Circle M became permanent, his knowledge and work ethic making him indispensable to the operation. Spring brought news that the Blackwell gang had been captured in Montana territory after a failed bank robbery. Frank Blackwell himself had died of his wounds not from Lucas's bullet, but from a marshal's shot during their final stand. The closure brought relief to both Lucas and Beatrice, though the memory of their ordeal had long since been overshadowed by the happiness they had found together. On a warm evening in May, as they sat on the expanded porch of their home, Beatrice placed Lucas's hand on her still flat stomach. "We're going to need that extra room sooner than we thought," she said softly. Lucas's expression transformed with wonder. "You're certain?" Beatrice nodded, her face aglow with happiness. "Come November, there will be 3 Jamesons in this house." Lucas gathered her into his arms, his heart too full for words. From the darkest moment of Beatrice's life, abandoned, beaten, left for dead beside the railroad tracks, had come the greatest joy either of them could have imagined. Their child, a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth Jameson, was born on a snowy November night, almost exactly 1 year after Lucas had proposed. She had her mother's auburn hair and her father's determined chin, and from her first cry, she had them both wrapped around her tiny fingers. As Lucas held his daughter for the first time, Beatrice watching them with tired but radiant eyes, he thought back to that fateful evening when he had spotted a still form beside the tracks, when he had made a promise to a stranger. "I'll get you home." He couldn't have known then that in saving her, he was finding his own way home to love, to family, to a future brighter than he had ever dared to dream. "What are you thinking?" Beatrice asked softly, reaching out to touch his arm. Lucas looked up, his eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. "I'm thinking that sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be." Beatrice smiled, understanding perfectly. "And sometimes being lost is the only way to truly be found." As the snow fell gently outside their window, the little family held each other close, their home warm with love and the promise of all the adventures yet to come, adventures they would face together. Just as they had since that first moment beside the tracks, when a wounded woman and a lonely cowboy found in each other the home they had both been seeking all along.